As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 7 of season 9, and I'm really excited to rewatch this incredible show today, because today I am covering a show called Sharp Objects. Now, I saw this when it came out in 2018, and it was fantastic, and I think there's some incredible performances within it. And when I saw this on my list of shows that I've already watched, I knew it had to be in this podcast, and I was just trying to find the right time to fit it in. I think this season is the perfect point to actually do that. So that is what I'm going to be doing today, and I'm really happy to be doing this because the fucking cast in this show, perfect. And I just really want to profile this show again. I think it's worth watching again, and I think it's got some very important messages in there, but also the storytelling is just magnificent. And so, looking at the cast list right now, we've got Amy Adams, who's playing Camille, who is the lead actress in this. Then we've got Sophia Lillis, who plays a young version of her, and I think that is incredible casting because Sophia Lillis and Amy Adams are very similar in all fairness. So having actors as talented as that in this show, it's just a great start, and that's just one character. We've then got Patricia Clarkson as Adora, we've got Chris Messina as a detective, Richard Wills, we've got Eliza Scanlon as Emma, we've got Madison Davenport as Ashley Wheeler, we've got Elizabeth Perkins as Jackie O'Neill. Like, there's so many incredible names in this show. Like, some of the recurring people, we've got Sydney Sweeney. Like, how big is she nowadays? And yeah, I just love this cast so much. When it originally came out, you could have sold me it just because of Amy Adams being in there. But with everyone else, just makes this cast so much better. But anyway, that's enough with the introductions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for heading over to whatever application you are on to actually listen to this, and thank you so much for the support and love that you show this podcast. It really means a lot to me, and it really helps now that I have adverts on the podcast that I can actually do more things with it. So you're amazing, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Obviously, you can find me on all the social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and also drop comments below. I'm on YouTube as well, so you can find me pretty much anywhere. But let's get into the episode. So, this is Sharp Objects, the mini-series episodes 1 to 4. Episode 1, Vanish. So, we meet two versions of the lead character, Camille, played by both Amy Adams and Sophia Lillis. At first we see Sophia Lillis as this, I want to say, around about 13, 14 maybe, and she's out playing with her sister who is possibly just a little bit younger than her, maybe say 11. And we see that the bond between the two of them is really quite strong. But then we see Amy Adams' version of this character, Camille, and there seems to be some issues. Firstly, she's a reporter, that's no issue whatsoever, but when she's asked by her boss to go back to her hometown of Wind Gap, Missouri, she puts up a bit of a fight. It seems like she really doesn't want to go back there, but because she's local to the area and she has the knowledge of that area, they think that it would be best that she does so. Her boss essentially says, "You're an okay writer, but this will make you better," because he believes that having that local knowledge is going to be exponentially beneficial towards her. She knows she got reviews and gets in the car and heads back to where she used to live, not contacting anyone on the way and telling them that she is coming to town. So her mother doesn't even know. When she gets there, however, she starts the process of actually trying to report on this. She goes and speaks to the police, but they don't seem to want to help. And so she goes and speaks to some locals, but they're no help either, other than knowing that there is an actual search party. So essentially what's happened in this small town is a 14-year-old girl has gone missing. And this is on the back of another 13-year-old girl going missing as well. And so Camille decides that she's going to help with the search party for the most recent missing girl. It's here that she meets Detective Richard Willis, played by Chris Messina. And what we see from Camille is that actually she is a functioning alcoholic, and she can hide it so well that she does so in front of this police officer without batting an eyelid. She's been pretty much drinking since she left St. Louis, which is where she's based. And now that she's back in town, she's starting to have flashbacks of her and her sister, but also things that happened in and around the town. For instance, when she first gets to town and she actually stays in a motel that first night, she remembers heading off into the woods one day and finding a shed that had material that young people shouldn't really be looking at, but it seemed to be a sort of hangout for the local boys. And it suggested that Camille, even later on in life, remembers this day really well, and that it did something to her, it awoke something in her, and as the adult Camille, she gets off to this, of her younger self looking at pornography essentially. Eventually she knows that she's going to have to go and see her mother, so she does that, and we can see why the communication lines between the two of them have broken down over the years. It would seem that her mother is concerned about what everyone else thinks around town and wants to involve herself in everything but doesn't want to be involved in anything. So she needs to know that she isn't part of the gossip by being part of the gossip. And it makes her feel very overbearing when it comes to how she treats Camille. She lives in this big house with her husband Alan and their other daughter, Amma. Now, Amma is someone that Camille has never really met, because there's quite an age gap between the two of them, and when Camille left town, Amma was only very young. And so when Camille ends up going into town, and due to the past that she's had, Camille is finding it hard to stay in the house that she actually is in with her parents, or at least her stepfather and her mother. She doesn't like it because it seems to hold bad memories for her, but at this point we don't see why. We obviously know that the mother is overbearing, but it seems she has a good relationship with her sister. However, then we see that one day Camille and her sister Marion were laying on a bed together. They were looking up at the ceiling and they were trying to make shapes out of the cracks that were up there, or the water stains that were coming through. Just anything to pass the time. But then something happened. We're unsure as to what yet, but it would seem that Marion had some sort of attack or reaction to something, and when a young Camille ran out to try and find her mother, we see the adult Camille realise that she can't stay in her old room anymore, and she leaves the home. She heads out to a bar, and she tries to get hold of the brother of one of the children that's died, a guy called John Keane. His sister Natalie is the second victim, and she just wants to have a chat with him about who Natalie was and what kind of things he knows. However, he is much younger than the age that he should be, because he's currently sat in a bar when she finds him. Detective Willis comes over and tells her, look, he can't go interviewing him. He needs someone who is actually an adult to be present. But he tries to pick her brain and get to know what she knows about this town. She knows, however, that when it comes to her interviewing Detective Willis, she's not going to get anywhere. So she cuts her losses and heads out the bar. Instead of going home, she sits in a car and ends up sleeping it off. Like I've said, she's a functioning alcoholic, but by this point we've seen her drink in pretty much every scene she's in, including ones where she's driving. However, when she heads back to her mother essentially says, "I've been hearing rumours about you throughout town, and you need to stop talking to people. Like, you are bringing shame upon our house, and you are interfering in things that you shouldn't be here interfering in." It would seem that her mother just doesn't like the job that she does, and doesn't like the fact that someone is reporting on this small town having issues, like murdered children. Camille then goes to speak to Bob Nash, who had a daughter, Anne Nash, who also went missing. She speaks to Bob about the disappearance, and he's reluctant to tell her anything really, but he tries his best. He's obviously still very affected by the fact that their daughter is gone, and he tries to give his best account of what happened. When Camille asks whether she could come back and see his wife later, he tells her no, because the wife hasn't even started to process this yet. And especially since they've got other young girls in the house and a second girl has gone missing, they really can't think about having anyone doing more investigation around their family and making them a target. Camille goes back into town and meets 3 girls. She met them earlier on in the episode, but they tend to be quite sassy with her, especially when it comes to the fact that she is investigating these dead girls. However, before she can inquire any more about them, there is a scream from an alley. Onlookers rush on and try and find out what the hell's going on, which obviously includes Camille and this group of girls. Once they get down this alley, they find the body of a dead teenage girl, and we can only assume that this is Natalie Keene. After speaking with Richard Wills again, Camille goes home. It's here that we find that the girl who she's seen around town throughout the day is actually her sister, Amma. They begin to discuss their middle sister, Marion, and Amma tells her that Marion's room has never changed since the day that she died. We get another flashback of when Camille goes into her sister's room and finds it exactly the same way that she left it. But then we see what happened the day of the funeral when Camille saw her first dead body. It was that of her sister, and she ended up walking up to the coffin, and because her sister didn't look the same as what she would have done normally, for instance, she had makeup on, Camille tried to remove it from her sister's face because she didn't look like her sister. Camille freaks out and she's obviously dragged out of the room. But that would have just been one more thing that her overbearing mother would feel that it made her look a fool. And we see how much this has affected Camille over the years, because that night, not only is she drinking, she gets into the bath. We see that there is a razor sat waiting for her to get in. And as she does, we see scars all over her back and her arms and her legs. And one of the scars says, "Vanish." Now, first of all, what I've got to say about this episode is it's fucking brilliant. I've just sat for an hour and a minute watching this show and could not take my eyes off it. It was gripping. Absolutely gripping. The atmosphere around it is brilliant, and the fact that I'm wearing headphones right now adds to the atmosphere. I didn't realise this when I first watched it, but they play around with the sound throughout the episode. For instance, at one point, Camille puts headphones in, and as she does, she takes one headphone, as you would do, puts it in, and then takes the other headphone and puts that in. And in my headphones, I heard the music get louder in one ear and was softer in the other, and then she put the other earphone in and the music became clear. Such a subtle thing to do, and probably wouldn't have been noticed just on a bog standard TV. But if you had your setup done properly, it's something that you would have picked up, and I'd never noticed it. And it's perfect. There's also a low hum throughout most of the episode, which is very disconcerting and gives it that thrilling atmosphere, that psychological atmosphere, a bit like what Hannibal did. It's just really intelligent writing and a really great way to actually kick off this particular episode or this particular show. But yeah, I'm intrigued as to where it's going to go, even though I've seen it before. I'm very sketchy on the details of what actually happens. I just know how good this was and how much it affected me at the time. So I cannot wait to get into the next episode. Episode 2, Dirt. So with the investigation continuing into Natalie's death, both Camille and Detective Willis are doing their own investigations. But it is the day of the funeral, and Camille heads off with her mother and Jackie O'Neill, who is basically a town gossip and a friend of the family, but she's noticed changes in Camille's mother ever since Marion died. And so while at this funeral, it would seem that Jackie is always the one who is supporting Camille, whereas her mother just doesn't want to. She outright rejects her daughter at seemingly every turn, including in this scenario where Camille tells her, I'm going to be going to this funeral, but I am doing it in a work capacity. And so during the funeral, she's sat looking around at everyone who's there, and she is trying to assess who the important players are in this. And not only that, she is making notes about who potentially could have killed this little girl, or at least who would have information about it. Detective Willis, however, is going a different route. He knows that the first girl, Anne, was actually found out in the woods, where she actually died. However, the second victim, Natalie, was posed in town and had been removed from the place that she'd been killed. So why has the MO changed? Why was one girl left to essentially rot and the other one was left to be found? Maybe the killer has already started to get more and more bold. We hear it a lot when it comes to serial killers that if they start to think that they can get away with it, they will go to extremes. And so at the funeral, he is outside investigating certain people, and he is caught by Camille taking soil samples from the tyres of some of the people that are actually around the event, because obviously they will have had soil samples from where Natalie was actually found. I mean, she was covered in mud when she was actually found, so they know roughly where this person was, and if they can match those soil samples to the ones that they've got on Natalie's body, then why was that person there? That's the first line of investigation. But he also finds out from the coroner that Natalie had had her teeth pulled out, and when he tries to investigate this, he realises how difficult it actually is. When the coroner says it's really difficult, you're going to have to put some muscle into it, he thinks the coroner's lying to him. However, he buys a pig's head and takes the teeth out of it with pliers and realises just how difficult that is. So now his thinking is that the killer is a man. I mean, most of the time in this sort of situation where it's little girls going missing, generally is a man. So the profile would fit, and especially the strength it took him to ply those teeth out, there's a good chance that he's right. Camille, however, is finding her investigation going in a different direction. When she meets two young boys who are playing in a park, and she asks whether they're scared because of what's going on, they tell her that they're no pussies. They're just throwing a ball back and forth, and Camille asks what they know about the case. They said they don't know nothing, but all they know is that the woman in white took Natalie. Camille asks who told them that, and they point her to the house down the street. She heads over and she starts talking to the boy that lives there, and he says that he's not going to talk to her about any of it. She asks to speak to her parent, and the parent is currently heavily dosed on something. She's got a drip in her arm and she looks very much worse for wear. When Camille ends up speaking to the police chief, Vickery, about this, he essentially says that the boy isn't to be trusted. He apparently told the police exactly what had happened, and they didn't want to investigate. This boy was trouble, and his mother was just the same, and he couldn't be trusted. So why would they waste man-hours looking into something which is essentially a rumour? And it turns out that the woman in white story is a story that they used to tell when Camille was a child. And so the woman in white was just a scare story way back when, so maybe it's just the same thing. Kids just telling scary stories. But she doesn't believe that at this point it is a man who did this. Vickery and Willis both believe that it is a man though, just because of the nature of the killings and everything that happened around them. And even when Camille tries to bring them onto her side, they both know what they are thinking. They both don't want to acknowledge that it could have been a woman, because the evidence is so hard swinging towards it being a man. Throughout the day, especially at the funeral, Adora is vile towards her daughter. And by her daughter, I mean Camille, not her daughter Amma. Amma is loved and adored and basically treated like a little princess. However, we know that Amma has a dark side to her, and she's that typical teenager. She is out there in the world, she is enjoying her life, but also she is stealing alcohol from stores and generally playing up. But her mother doesn't see that side of her. She keeps it well hidden, and she just acts as if she is an angel, and that's all her mother sees, whereas Camille is constantly getting berated by her mother. At the funeral, as Camille is trying to write notes as to who she thinks maybe was involved in any of this, or where further investigation needs to be done, her mother keeps taking the pen off her. She keeps telling Camille that she's embarrassing the family. And as time goes on, we see more and more that Camille was never the favoured one out of her and Marion. We see a scene later on where Marion is running through the house being chased by her sister, and when Marion sees her mother, she runs into her arms. Her mum embraces her and takes her into her bedroom, and it seems joyous. Whereas Camille is left out in the corridor, and it just seems like a really unhappy life. It's hard when you have that kind of connection or disconnection with someone. I've had it in my own life where you feel like you aren't seen. It's a real worry because it can affect a child for the rest of their life. I know it has with me. I had a stepmother that I didn't feel loved me, and it was hard for me at that time because all I wanted was to integrate myself into the family. I just wanted to be part of the family. She had a daughter and quite rightly loved her daughter to bits, but I never felt that love. I always felt as if I was competing with her, and the competition was difficult. Now, I'm not saying that that wasn't the other way around for her daughter and my father, but she did call my father her father, so it was hard. It really was. And that led to a breakdown of their relationship, and I got the blame for it, even though I was just a 10-year-old boy. So watching someone like Camille being treated the way that she has, I could have gone down the same path as her. I could be an alcoholic. The only thing that I seem to be addicted to is having to find someone to love me. And thankfully, I found people in my life that do that for me. They care for me and they love me, and I feel it, which is something that I haven't had in such a long time that I can't even describe how glad I am of that now. But it's been a long time coming. So anyway, Adora eventually confesses that she used to have Natalie over. She saw a lot of Camille in Natalie. The fact that Camille used to be a bit of a tomboy and Natalie was exactly the same. She saw that maybe she could help Natalie out and look after her the way she hadn't done with her own daughter. At no point did it seem that she actually reached out to Camille for this, but she was trying to apparently help Natalie right up until she actually died. And so this is why we actually see why Adora is so affected by this death. She seems broken by it. But the problem is she has her own daughter stood in front of her asking for love. That's all she's ever done. Asked for her mother's love and care and never received it. And it's tragic. Episode 3, Fix. So as the episode starts, we see a bunch of kids having a party out in the middle of town, and it's the same bunch of kids that we keep seeing throughout the episode, Amma being one of them. But as we keep seeing, the more and more Amma is introduced to us, the worse we see that she is getting. We see that she is a teenager, but she's only 14 and she is out of control. However, once again, when she's in the eyes of her mother, she's an angel. And so we see this dichotomy between the two of them, that on one side, she can't do any wrong, and on the other, she can't do anything but. Camille obviously sees all of this because she knows the signs. She's lived the signs. She's just as bad as what Amma is now, way back when. Amma comes home and she's driving a golf cart, and when it crashes into her mother's rose bush, Camille goes out and tries to help her in the house. Once inside, Amma is being a little bit too friendly, as if Camille isn't trying to mother her in some way, or at least be a big sister to her, which she obviously is. Amma claims that she just wants to be friends with her sister, but the way that she treats her sister when they're out in public is totally different to the way that she treats her when she's at home. Very much the same way that she is in her normal life. And so Camille has started to get wise to this now. And so the next morning when Camille tries to sneak out of the house, Amma is downstairs with her mother, and she is playing it off as if she's been up during the night, feeling ill, when actually she's just hungover. It's obvious that she's now got a drinking problem as well as her sister, but her mother doesn't see the bad side of her. She only ever blames Camille, and when later in the episode Camille comes home and finds her mother tending to this rose bush, she essentially blames Camille for the way that the rose bush has ended up, as if it was Camille driving the golf cart and not her sister. But of course, Camille can't say anything. She doesn't want her sister to get into trouble for any of this, but nobody would believe her anyway. It would seem that now Amma is the replacement for Marion. As I've said, Adora only cares about what the public perception is of her family, and we see this throughout the episode because we find out that Camille has actually been in an institution. Because of all the scars on her body and the fact that she's written words on her body, we find out that she actually checked herself in to a clinic because she was depressed and she was harming herself badly by the looks of things. While she's in there, she meets a young girl named Alice. This is who is played by Sydney Sweeney. And we see that this girl has some problems. Obviously, she's in an asylum, so she will have some problems. But Camille is paired with her anyway. Alice seems to have a connection to music, and throughout the episode we keep seeing that Camille has a connection to music as well. But when Camille actually starts opening up to Alice, Camille tells her that she isn't actually into music, so we can only suspect that the connection to music comes from her meeting of this girl. Throughout her time there, they bond and they get to know each other. But one day when it's visiting day, it seems both Camille and Alice have a bad time when it comes to their respective parents. That night Alice asks if it ever gets any easier, because Camille is a lot older than Alice. It would seem that they both have the same problem, they both harm themselves, whereas Camille does it all over her body, and especially her upper torso. It would seem that Alice actually does it to her legs. And when we see the state of her legs, it is a hard what to have someone do that to themselves, because nobody should have to suffer in that kind of silence. But that night after Alice asks this question and Camille tells her that it doesn't get any easier, I assume in some cases it will do, but in these two cases it just doesn't. Alice seems to have a really tough night. She isn't allowed a phone or any sort of musical device in her actual room, and so Camille goes out and tries to talk to the on-staff nurse. She tells her that Alice is suffering really badly and she could really use this, and that Camille will be with her the whole time and that they'll just have it for a while. Camille heads back into the room with the device and they listen to music. They do it throughout the episode where they pair up and they listen to the music and it soothes them. However, this night it doesn't, and when Camille has it taken away from her and then heads out and uses her phone for 5 minutes, when they head back into the room, it turns out that Alice has actually drunken bleach, or some cleaning product from a cleaning cart. She's laying dead on the floor and Camille is devastated. She heads into the bathroom and she sees that the toilet seat is loose. She takes the bolt from underneath it and starts slashing at her own wrists before the orderlies can come in and take hold of her. And this whole scene, this whole journey that she goes on through both Amy Adams and Sydney Sweeney are just compelling. I think this is one of Sydney Sweeney's earliest performances, and in fact, the three girls that are youngest in this, Eliza Scanlon, Sophia Lillis, and Sydney Sweeney, are phenomenal. To say that they are so young in their career at this point, but the fact that Alice has done this has affected Camille throughout her life, and now, even though she still listens to the music that Alice used to play for her, she also sees visions of Alice as well as her sister. Detective Willis, however, is trying to get to the bottom of who actually did this, and he just keeps coming up against it when it comes to Chief Vickery. Vickery thinks it's either a trucker or a Mexican because it's that kind of town. He doesn't want it to be anyone who's inside that town because he should know everybody in town. And who is this big hotshot coming across from Kansas City trying to solve this crime when he can do it perfectly well himself? It's that kind of tactic that ends up fucking investigations like this up, because people aren't open to the possibility that it could be someone else. For instance, MS-13, because it's on someone's knuckles, doesn't mean that that person is part of that gang, just because you've seen a photo fit of it. But again, I digress. But of course, Detective Willis can see all possibilities and knows that, yes, okay, it could be someone just passing through, but also someone took time with these crimes. they would have had to be in town for a while if they were going to kill these girls, take their teeth out, and do whatever they did to them. And so it makes sense for someone to be in town to try and get away with it. And the fact that it's happened twice means that it would have to be someone moving in and out of the town all the time. Or the other possibility is it's still someone in town. And since they are a pig slaughter in town, it would make sense that someone in town who has worked in that factory has done this. The current people that Camille and Detective Willis are looking at are John Keane, who is Natalie Keane's brother, and Bob Nash, who is Anne Nash's father. So both dead girls seem to have been killed by someone who knows them, potentially. But when Camille interviews both of them, Bob Nash ends up accusing John Keane, and John Keane ends up accusing Bob Nash. But John Keane's girlfriend backs him up and says that he couldn't have done this because on the night that his sister died, he was with her, as in, he was with his girlfriend Ashley. John Keane, however, when he is interviewed, ends up getting a reprieve because Adora ends up coming over and berating her daughter and telling her that she's basically bringing shame to the family, as she's said throughout. And it seems that they are no step closer to any of this. And so she ends up speaking with Detective Willis and they get drunk together. It seems like they're heavily flirting right up until the point when Amma and her friends turn up. Amma was meant to be staying at home. She promised her sister that she would, but she's out. She's 14 and she's out round town at night, drinking and hanging out with boys. She teases Camille and essentially makes her feel like trash. She's been a real pain in the ass when she actually turns up, and she is mean. She's just a mean girl at this point. She sticks a lollipop in her hair and she really just pisses her sister off. And it's now that we see how bad Amma has actually got in town. And maybe now that her sister has backed her up so many times, it's about time that she stopped. Because her sister needs to be taken down a peg or two. And especially when there's a killer of young girls on the loose, and Camille is just trying to keep her sister safe. Episode 4, Ripe. So with the fact that her mother ended up cutting her hand in the previous episode because she was trying to fix the rose bushes, but then ended up blaming it all on Camille, she's also decided that the next day she can't go to lunch with her friends because she seems a bit of a drama queen in all fairness. She likes to make her issues everybody else's issues. And so instead she ends up sending Camille. When Camille gets there, however, all the ladies want to discuss is the fact about these two young girls. Obviously with Bob Nash and John Keane being the head billing for this chat. Obviously all the girls around offer up their own opinion of what happened. Some believe that maybe John killed Anne and that Bob ended up killing Natalie as revenge. But it's been mentioned a few times throughout the episodes that even though John Keane has a girlfriend, that maybe he's hiding a secret. And if he's hiding one secret, maybe he can hide another. The fact that he's been out there killing girls. And maybe he's killing girls because he has no sexual desire for them. And so that's why these girls aren't ending up being abused as well. But it's just that small-minded, small-town mentality where they will believe anything that anyone says around town. When actually, if they open their mind a little bit and just saw people as people, maybe they'd live a happier life instead of gossiping the way that they do. Camille, however, has offered to take Detective Willis around different areas in the town to help him get to know the actual town itself. But where she's taking him are actual crime scenes. While she's there, she tells him of the horrors that have happened there. She also ends up taking him to a shed where we recognise from earlier on in the series. This is the shed that she envisioned she went into as a child, with pornography hanging all over the walls, and she ended up masturbating to it. Just the thought of it. And now while she's in this shed, she's overcome with the emotion of that previous time. She heads away from it and tries to hide her shame, I suppose. But when Detective Willis actually realises what's going on, he asks if she's ever been in there with a boy. It would seem that this would be the place where certain cheerleaders would come and be with the quarterback or be with several boys from the football team that week. and when he asks whether she'd been one of those girls at any point, she doesn't really answer. But it would seem that there's good reason that she doesn't answer. She feels a connection with Detective Willis, and while they're out in the woods, he goes to kiss her. She doesn't allow him to, but allows him to put his hands down her pants. While in the woods, he plays with her, and we can only assume that she comes. And then they head back to her house, where they find Chief Vickery coming out of. The chief, however, has been having issues. So going back to this shed that was out in the woods, we keep seeing flashbacks of Camille when she was younger. She was out there and she was just observing the wildlife, and we keep seeing visions of these boys coming up behind her. Earlier on in the season, we actually saw her running through the woods, and these same boys were chasing her through. And it would seem that she ended up being raped in the woods. Now, we're unsure of that at this point, but this memory seems to hold for her throughout, and maybe that is one of the reasons for her continuous drinking. Obviously, the death of her sister is a major one, but maybe she couldn't come clean about this because the reputation that it would have against the family. And of course, her mother would only care about her own reputation, nothing to do with her daughter. The chief, however, now that he's been over to see Adora, you can see that there is actually a connection between those two as well. But we're not the only ones who can see it. Alan, her husband, can see it as well. And he is more than unhappy with the fact that he can't even get anywhere near his wife. His wife doesn't want him to touch her, she doesn't want his attention, and shuns him at every turn. However, when Adora is in the presence of the chief, she's very flirtatious and she's very happy for him to be in her presence, whereas her husband never feels like he can be there. So we start to see growing tension between the two of them. Each time that he's about to leave her for the night, because it seems that they stay in separate rooms, he always asks, "Do you want me to stay? Do you need anything from me?" And she always replies with, "I can't see what I would need," which means that we can only assume that their relationship hasn't been physical for a long time. He tells her later on that he is also affected by Marion's death and she is not the only one that feels it. But it has been a long time since Marion died, and there needs to be a time to move on. She can't just wallow. She has a second child with him in Amma, and she also has a daughter who is estranged from her now because she'd never paid much attention to her when she was younger. Which for me really sucks because she's got two alive children. One who doesn't want to talk to her anymore because of the way that she is, and another who acts up but plays nice when she's around her just because she can get away with it. Amma is a complete mess, but will play her mother like a fiddle because she knows that she can. Amma, however, is creating weird posters of John Keane, and it's essentially showing him as the killer throughout this whole thing. And since it's Adora's hog farm that he actually works for, when she ends up distributing these pictures, they end up sacking John Keane because they believe he is the murderer, because his reputation is taking a hit, and they just can't keep him on anymore. And so it would seem that tensions are getting higher and higher throughout this whole episode. But when Camille goes over to meet John Keane and has a drink with him, they're sat and they're talking about the two girls, Natalie and Anne. It seems that they were both close friends, but also there was a third in that group. And of course, we already know who the third is. And so now it would seem that if anyone's going to have a target on her back in town, it's going to be Amma, because she was always the third. But this seems not to be affecting her anymore. This, whatever it is, yes, she's playing up, but it doesn't seem to be affecting her one little bit. So not only do we know that Natalie was always around Adora, because she was trying to help, we found out in the last episode that Anne was also tutored by Adora, and now Amma is the one who is potentially in danger. And so when Camille gets back to the house, she tries to find where Amma is, but she can't see her in the house. She heads out and she starts to head towards the shed, and while she does, she has a devastating image of her sister laying dead on the floor, before we see actual Amma out on her rollerblades, rolling around the street, before she gets caught like a deer in the headlights. Okay, so let's do a quick brief on this. This show's fucking excellent. Like, I forget how good the show is, and I know I say that all the time, but this one is particularly good. I'm sat watching it and I'm just like in awe. Like, the 50 minutes that the runtime is for the episode feels like it's gone in about half an hour. And quite a lot of the time I watch stuff at 1.5 speed. This, I don't watch at that, but it feels like it's going that quick. However, the pacing for it is so slow that it makes it so subtly quick. It's ridiculous. I don't get how I can watch an episode for 50 minutes and feel like it's half an hour, but have so much information from the episode. It's mind-boggling, but it's so well written. The cast are incredible. Amy Adams is just at her peak in this. She's so good in the show. Chris Messina is excellent as always. I'd never see a bad performance from him. I don't generally like the characters that he plays, but then again, I always judge him from when he was in the newsroom. And like I said in the episode, you've got 3 young actors in this, in Sydney Sweeney, Eliza Scanlon and Sophie Lillis, that are excellent. And like I said, I think this is one of their first few forays into acting. So to be this good at this age, I mean, this was, 6 years ago now? 7 years ago? And the way that they act is phenomenal. You could think that they were a lot older than they are. But what a show. Even the surrounding cast that's around them are all excellent. And yeah, it's such a great cast and well written for females as well, in my opinion. Like, they're very strong characters. They don't fuck around too much. They're not like dependent on men all the time. They're strong-willed and they're smart. And I just think it's a brilliant casting, brilliant acting, brilliant writing, incredible directing, all round. Such a stunning show. But the subject matter of it is grim. 2 young girls being killed in a small town is never what you want to hear. Anyone dying in the way that these poor children have died, you never want to hear about. But for some reason, whenever it's 2 young girls, it's always a little bit more tragic. And that isn't to take away anyone who's lost young boys in this circumstance or anyone in this circumstance. But it always seems to hit home a little bit more. And so having someone investigate this and seeing the process behind it and having different investigation techniques from Detective Willis to what Camille's doing to whatever the fuck the chief is up to, it's such a great watch. Camille's background seems just devastating. The scars on her body obviously they're scars, so they've healed over, but they look so painful. And it's terrifying to think that this poor woman has put up with so much and done terrible things to herself just to have the scars literally tattooed onto her body for life. It's such a great show, and I'm so glad I'm covering it. When I did this podcast, this wasn't a show that I thought I would do again, until I actually saw it as a show that was on HBO, and I thought, I need to cover this. It's not disappointed one little bit. Anyway, I'm done rambling, so thank you for listening today. Come follow me on all my socials, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you call it. Blue Sky, I'm over there now. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts from. Come find me, come rate me, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. But thank you for today. Thank you for listening. And until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.